All right, so Mayor, I want to talk about, lead off with this housing incentive program, I guess that was, approved? Maybe take us back to Tuesday and talk about that one and, what the city is going to be doing now.
Well, it's very exciting and something that we've seen that we really have to do. We have, I believe there's about 78 to 80 lots that are available within the city. But realistically, you take a lot of them out because an owner, maybe they're not buildable, or an owner just wants to keep it as a buffer between their neighbors, and so they're not really sellable. And so we've really ascertained that there's about 33 to 34 lots that are available in the city. On average, I believe there's about 12 to 14 new homes built a year within the city. So that lets you know that you're just a tad under 3 years worth of inventory. And so something had to be done. So we, the EDB and Mackey got together, and there was not a study, but there was a group of folks that came in, builders, real estate, that took a look at what could be done. The biggest issue is infrastructure. So there are some places within the city that could be developed that would give us much more housing. But the biggest issue for a developer is, how do you handle the holding cost in putting in a street, the electrical lines under it, the water lines, the sewage lines, and all that? That's what gets to be cost prohibitive. So in this, the city's taking an active role with them to put some money into the infrastructure in a few different areas, and I believe that this is going to stimulate some growth in housing. It would be good for, right now we don't have a lot of homes available for sale. Our population is going up. We saw in our last census, which is good. I believe I heard it went up by 400
something like that.
people or so. And so now we do have a lot of brand new apartments being built. I think to the tune of about 400 units.
Plus.
Which is going to be helpful, but there are those people that want to live in their own home. So I believe this is going to be a strong thing, and theoretically it should help ease the burden for other taxpayers, because if we increase the tax base, theoretically, then the other people don't have to carry the weight of everything. So I'm very optimistic about it. I'm proud of Josh and all the work that he did, and everybody involved is very helpful. Now we're going to see where it leads.
Yeah, let me add to that. Sometimes you hear about the number of lots that are still available, and it sounds like, well, that could carry us for a while. And but what you forget is those, we call them infill lots in planning and zoning world. Those are lots from existing developments that haven't been built upon, and oftentimes there's a reason. Maybe it's the lowest point and there's a drainage issue, or it's the least desirable because of its configuration. So just because you might say you have 60 or 70 lots available, many of those are not likely to be jumped on anytime soon, because they were in a subdivision where they were not the most desirable lot in that subdivision. The other thing that goes along with that, I think, talking about the use of city resources, is if we were a fringe area of a metro like Sun Prairie, next to Madison and one of those kind of things, we wouldn't have to incentivize people to build. They would know that they're going to have a build out in 5 years, and if they have 40 lots available, 5 years from now they're all going to be built upon. We don't know that. As the mayor said, they may be having to go through 10, 15 years or more for the entire subdivision to build out, and that debt cost that you carry from street, sewer, water, storm sewer can be daunting. And so this won't cover the full cost by any means, but it's a way of saying we'd like to partner with you on those initial infrastructure costs to make it palatable. And hopefully from this we'll see maybe a couple of subdivisions develop that otherwise might have not happened, and we'll have some new housing options for people.
So can you who wants to give us the nuts and bolts of this program and how it would work, and what actually are you offering developers? What is the housing incentive in this case? Can you break it down a little bit, or is that a Steve question? Or?
Yeah, it looks like you have the policy in front of you maybe, and I don't actually. But we're looking at contributing thank you, to a project based upon some of the particular details. And one of the things we have a limit because we only have so much money to go around, And, we're not sure how far $500,000 between the city and EDB is actually going to go. But there's an application process. There's regulations in terms of the standards that you have to meet. You have to meet all the city construction standards. We'll be looking at things like, what we're getting, in terms of the value for what you're planning to do. There's discussion in this policy about when the monies would be paid, what's expected of the developer in terms of handling the other costs, assessments being part of the deal, and that they're expected to be paid in full and turned over as development occurs. That's how we get our money back. At least a good share of it is because when they pay to buy a lot, a certain percentage of that will be added on for their share of that 80-foot or 100-foot stretch of utilities and street. So it really just kind of lays out all the criteria for what you would need to do to qualify for these funds. And some of this will still have to be tweaked, I assume.
And it is, it's a total of $250 from the EDB. They put in $250. The council is going to match that at $500,000, and it's basically there for infrastructure. So it's a housing incentive. Is not going to give a buyer or a seller necessarily money. It's the incentive there is to help these lots get going, and then as that money is paid back, then that money will stay in that fund so it can continue to fuel other future developments. And that way, if they come, there's going to be some strict parameters there on housing, what can be put up on whatnot. And the application process from the developer is very clear as far as what they need to do. And that's really what it's there to do, is to incentivize them to get out and look to build and to help with that carrying cost. We firmly believe, and we've got great builders here in the area, that this is going to ease the burden for the financial burden, and that really should spur some development. I know as this team of people, builders, real estate agents, and bankers, as they got together, this was received very well. So I'll be interested to see how it goes from here.
And looking back at the policy again there, Mike, the priorities are really based upon the things you might expect. Assess value to be created, number of units to be created, how many lots will there be, does this fit with our 2019 housing study update. The city, for its investment, has a right to say we're looking for certain types of housing, and this is not to be exclusive. In fact, one of the things that's come out of our housing studies has been the gap is in a certain range. So we'd like to see people trying to meet the needs that we're seeing as far as a certain price range and type of housing if we're going to use our limited dollars. So we'll be referring to that housing plan and saying, well, how does your proposed home value and type of home fit with where we're saying we're deficient right now? And that'll be part of how we prioritize what projects to do if we get multiple applications.
Does this go into effect right away then, or does it start like next year?
I believe it's said in there, is it October 1st?
Oh.
We will start taking applications. I believe that's the intent.
Okay.
I think, if I'm remembering this correctly.
I thought it said 2020 somewhere.
Well, I meant the part about starting to
The process.
The process.
Oh.
As far as funding, it would go
Right.
into next year's, because
Yeah.
the 250 still has to be funded
Correct.
in next year's budget.
Gotcha.
So that,
Good point.
the thing is, the council, it was a unanimous vote on this, which I was very happy with. So I'm sure that would be approved, but the money part will not be able to go into effect until 2020.
Okay.
But the application process, I believe, will start
Earlier
in
than that,
October.
yeah, correct.
Because most of the builders looking to do this, they're not going to want to put an infrastructure in
Yeah.
February.
Right.
Yep.
And I understand that this winter is going to be a very mild winter. We'll have some snow, but it's not going to be real cold. Just cold enough to keep the snow, but that's it. That's the forecast.
It is. It is the forecast. That's good.
What was the vote like on that? Do you remember what the vote was?
I think you just said it was unanimous.
Unanimous.
Okay.
I don't even believe there was that much discussion.
9.
I believe it
No.
went right to a vote. It was 9-0. There was one alderman not present, Alderman Zaleski, but he's been very in favor of housing, and so I'm sure he would be he would have been a yes, but the official vote was 9-0.
Let me add one more thing while you're thinking of what else you want to take on in this agenda. Economic development isn't the most important thing we probably do in large part. I mean, obviously street maintenance and all these things, it's all important. But it's a moving target. I've been here 8 years, and the target has already moved multiple times, between industrial land acquisition or workforce, finding more people to work here. Or maybe it's been TIF assistance for commercial projects, or apartments were the big thing a few years ago. And like the Mayor said, we've now added 400 plus units with just a little bit of city nudging is all to meet that need. But it's a constantly changing field. What are people lacking? What is the holdup in getting more commercial and industrial development? And like I said, it ranges from housing. Daycare has been talked about a lot lately. And Mackey's spending a lot of time on daycare because people who want to get back in the workforce are finding a hard job getting someone to watch their kids. So economic development is so broad-based and so rapidly changing. And right now, single-family housing is something that we want to make sure we can accommodate for people who would like to locate here. Again,
I was going to ask you, Mayor, about the council did decide to go ahead with, they're extending the one-way on 2nd Street.
Yep.
Maybe just recap that discussion for us and why, what were some of the reasoning behind that?
So the discussion, the vote ended up 8-1, I believe. Alderman Witzel had a concern. It was in the consent agenda, so it'd been to Public Works, and he did have a concern with it. But the way this started was 8 or 9 months ago, there was a group of seniors actually sitting in this room with us, and they had concerns there at the senior center, and there were 3 to get their bingo board up. We got that up right away. And then the other thing was adequate handicap parking, because when the library went in, I think initially there were going to be more handicap spots closer to the senior center, and they weren't. They were over closer to the library. Well, many of the seniors that go in, they have walking assistants or a walker or something like that, and so, but they really didn't have any handicap parking spots right in front of there. So Tom Turchi and Justin Casperson got involved, and let's take a look at this. And it was decided, and at a very nominal fee, that we could actually move a couple of handicap spots right there. And seniors had another concern, is that when they go to their meetings, their luncheons, and their meetings, if the library is full, there are some of them that would come there, see that there's really no parking close, and then leave, and it was affecting their attendance. So they were looking at ways to get more parking, and of course, we told them right across the street there's public parking, and there's open spots there. Well, which is all fine and good, unless you're a person in a walker.
Yeah.
That going across the street can become an issue. So we started to look at what would be the most cost-effective way. And since 2nd Street was already a one-way street, if it wasn't, I don't think that we even would have entertained anything.
No.
But it's already a one-way street, and the north side of that is the community center and the library. And then there's a couple of houses there that would be affected. And so the determination then is, could we do a pilot program to see how much disruption there's going to be to that local area, which is why the way this is set up is it's a temporary thing for a couple of months. Let's take a look. And so we'll put, I believe it's 10 or 11 more stalls right there in front of the senior center, which they were really happy about, because those could be stalls where the seniors would probably get the best bang for your buck, if you will, because the people that are going to want to go into the library are going to go into the parking lot. It's going to be closer. So this is where, for the seniors that use that literally every day, I mean, there's so many different classes there, and I believe it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, that they would be able to park right there in front and get to the door, and it's safe. You know, they're going to have the one step up that they have to do, but they were very on board in that. So what I was very, very, really happy about is the fact of, you know, this large group of people came to the city with a concern, and we listened to their concerns. And so we were able to get one thing up right away. We were able to get the handicap spot. And this other thing is, you know, we're going to check to see, because what we don't want to do is have it disrupt too much traffic. We'll have to see if that does, if it affects the other neighbors. And then you juggle with, you know, benefit versus trouble. And so we'll take a look and see. And so Alderman Witzel had his issue was, for some people that come down the street in the back, now they're going to have to alter their way. Well, realistically, I believe it's Cedar.
Yes.
If they just continue down Cedar,
Yep.
it won't alter their way, because there's a parking lot there in the back.
Correct.
So for many people that go that way, it's not going to alter their problem at all. For the people that are on the other street, they would be able to turn and get into the library anyway. So that is where it's at. I'm very happy that it is a 2 or 3 month trial, because we want to be respectful to the other people that have concerns. As now, I was not in office at the time, but you remember there was a little fuss made, and maybe justifiably so, when you took 2nd Street and one is a one way, the other is a one way another way. You know, that's changing everything, and that was never a trial. That was, we're going to go. Now we're doing it a little bit different. We want to hear from the people there if they have a concern. And if those people that affects will do the same thing, come talk to us at the city. I've seen on some of the social media stuff, we do listen. That's why this is there. So that'll be their chance to voice their concerns.
Right.
This has been Board of Public Works, and when this was all being worked on, those are all public meetings where the public that do have concerns, they're welcome to come and let's hear your concerns. So I think overall it's a very positive thing, and we'll have to see if there is the benefit there, and see if the seniors do take advantage of that, and see where that leads us.
You know, oftentimes at these news conferences, I try to add a little bit to what Bob said. I don't think there's much to add. He nailed it. You absolutely nailed why this is a good idea, how it was done properly, the idea of it being a limited time frame that we can monitor and see if it's a positive or a negative. The only thing I'd add to it is oftentimes we're criticized for not making efforts at these trials. You know, they say, well, was it take an act of Congress to try something new and see if it works? And we're saying, hey, look, we can do some temporary signage and markings, try it for 60 days, and if it works, make it permanent. If it doesn't, if it brings about complaints and problems, we'll pull back. I mean, but this is the kind of creativity that I think people call for. So I hope they recognize the fact that this is a good thing, even if at the end of the day there's some things come up that nobody ever thought of as to why it's not a good permanent move. And I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that people will see that more parking, and they'll get used to the fact that it's the same direction that traffic on 2nd is already going one way from Maple to Central, and see it as a positive.
And they are, it was interesting at the meeting, because Alderman Witzel had an issue with it, and we certainly appreciate his input. Mm-hmm. And there were other aldermen that have had, Rebecca Spiros had, she said that she's in favor of it because that is her aldermanic district. And during voting times, there are people that would really like to get in and get out. So they see it as a positive. So you've got some people there that, a lot of people at this meeting that were really in favor of it. And both sides were heard, and then the vote went 8-1. So I believe overall it's positive, but the key thing is it's temporary, as Steve said. We're looking at it. We're going to really take a good look at it and then ultimately make a good decision. And hopefully we'll get public input on that decision.
Any comments, Mayor, on there was an analysis done of the move to the new city hall that you heard about on Tuesday, and it sounds like you got some, I guess, positive numbers about the final cost of the remodeling for the new city hall, and any thoughts there, or any summary of what you heard on Tuesday in that regard?
Well, I will tell you, the longer I'm in office, the more respect I gain for the work that city staff does. This is not easy to do. When you're in government, you are often criticized. And one thing the government does not do well is voice their victories, or, hey, we did this pretty good. And you're always, are we spending the money wisely? And so I think this was a great thing. And you're going to be seeing more of this, which I'm glad, coming up, very transparent. This is what we said in 2015. This is what went on in 2016. And the great thing was, this was the final budget that we went into, and we came in just below that. I think that's a very positive thing. The other thing is, net bottom line, when you look at, I believe that the move is a good move, certainly from a financial standpoint of, Dan went over the cost to run the old building versus the cost to run the new building, and that's substantially less. The other thing is the synergy within city employees, I believe, is getting better. And so I was elated with that, and we're going to be doing that on more projects. And I believe kind of celebrating those, when we're often very critical of, when this doesn't go right, which of course we have to be, because if you don't own your mistakes, then you really can't get better. Right. But at the same time, you need to go out and say, yeah, this was done well. Dan put together a great presentation. We came in under budget, and I think that's a testament to city staff.
Yeah, I agree with Bob. You're going to see both the library and community center and Wenzel Family Plaza financials coming up here soon, and they're both going to be the same. They both came in, within budget. And I think it's important to say that, because I think sometimes people lump all levels of government together, and they look at Madison, they look at Washington, D.C., and they say, we know how this goes. We've seen the overspending, and we need to take our lumps if we do in fact go over budget. But truthfully, if it ever becomes apparent in a project that we're going to have to potentially go over budget, we're going to come to the council and say, I know we were going to do this additional room renovation. If we do, we're going to go over by probably 30 or 40,000. Do you still want us to do it? Because otherwise, we need to stay within. In this case, it was 750,000 or thereabouts. With the library and community center, it was 7 million. We need to stay within those amounts if we don't get approval from the governing body to exceed them for some particular purpose. So, but you're right. Truly, the mayor's right. If we don't tell people that, perception is, it was going to be 7 million, but it probably turned out to be 10 million, when we weren't looking. It's not true.
And so as Steve said, we're going to be doing that with the community center coming up, the library, the Wenzel Family Plaza, and another thing that we're doing is with our development agreements. You're going to see a presentation in the next couple of months, so that the citizens of Marshfield see, when you do these development agreements with whoever, what is your process?
Right.
And we're going to be very transparent on how it works from hey, I have an idea, all the way through to completion of the project. So it's very visible for people to see, and that whole process is very transparent.
Yeah.
So we're going to be doing that, so that I'm hoping that the more people see, the more transparency there is. There's got to be transparency when we do something good, and there's got to be transparency when we have issues, or let's just say you should never say this in government, but when we blow it,
Yep.
right, then that needs to be out there, and then we need to say, yeah, we made a mistake here, and we're going to learn from this, so we don't duplicate the mistake. That's the worst thing of a mistake, I think, is if you don't learn from it. If you learn from it, well, take your hit. But so you'll be seeing that come forward, and I know, and I will tell you, as media, I appreciate you asking that question, because it's not interesting. I mean, you had a project and you came in under budget, and it's a great project. It's not fun, but I get it, and I really appreciate you asking that.
Well, and if we say, and a lot of people in this building that you're sitting in right now say this, that we don't want to be lumped in with Madison and Washington D.C., that we're all doing these things that aren't great, then we better be open and transparent and show that we're not doing things that may be happening in Congress or the state legislature. Otherwise, we are going to be lumped in with what they hear on TV about all levels of government. So it's imperative that we separate ourselves in a meaningful way, and this is one example.
Okay. Well, Mayor, so I got at the fair, and on Tuesday, got some positive feedback about the fair too from Dale. Great news for the fair, and maybe just give us your thoughts on that and the fair in general and how it went. And it sounds like everyone was happy with the 6-day event.
Yeah, it was. The great thing about there were many great things of the fair. I didn't get to do the high dive. That was a low point for me. But if you watch that high dive, that was really incredible, and that's there for free, just for people to come on in. But I will say this: we really got lucky with the weather. Every day was
nice.
Incredible. And I'd like to thank you all for the updates that you did daily on, this is what happened on day 2 and this is what happened on day 3. I thought that was very positive. But at the end of the day, Dale Christensen did come to council on Tuesday and said that the numbers that they have, now it takes a long time, they're going by tickets and whatnot. So it takes months to put together cost, profit, loss, or any of that. So that that we'll have to wait and see. But with this, prior to, there was a concern with the controversy on one of the things that was there. But at the end of the day, Dale said that attendance was up 30% over last year. And I remember going through, seeing that. My favorite part to go through is Big Round Barn with the cows and whatnot. I love watching the families and back there and stuff. But boy, when you went down that midway to the rides, there were people waiting in lines, and you want to make sure everybody has their time on the ride. The food stands were all did well. There was lines there, and they got through pretty efficiently. So overall, it was a big hit. We're looking forward to see what those final numbers are, but it's. I talked to some of the people that have been coming to the fair since they were kids, and they were so like, this has got to keep going. It's just in their DNA, and that experience, and it's a great experience. Those kids that sell cows or pigs or whatever, they raise those for months, and it's a great thing to teach them the responsibility of life. So it all around, in my opinion, it was a big hit.
Yeah, and I think, and like we said, there was some controversy about the one exhibit. There was some questions about the open containers on a part of the property. And then after all that, we get a huge increase in attendance and good things happen. I also think it was a good idea a couple of years ago, and I know that this came with some heartburn too, but when they moved it up a week, because that whole issue of having kids have to go back to school, and they're supposed to be doing the 4-H displays and demonstrations, that was a bit awkward. So I think they're doing a lot of good things over there. I commend Dale and the board for the, some of the hard work they do that nobody ever sees. Obviously, great weather helped. And there's no doubt about 75 degrees and sunny is a lot better than cold rain. But commend them all for what they did. It was a great event.
Anything on the closed session?
Especially this one.
Hmm? Especially when the city administrator's performance review.
I'm still here.
You did show up for work the next day.
I did. I did show up for work.
I
I think
You know what? I would like to say something on that.
Yeah,
Since we can't necessarily talk about that, I guess. But I could tell you what, Steve is a phenomenal city administrator. It's an honor to work with him. I remember how when I came in, and I told him this the other night, back when I was running, I wanted to go around and meet, the different people, and I was so nervous when I went in to meet Steve the first time. I remember just sitting there shaking, and he said, "Calm down." and I will tell you, my respect for him has grown daily. The citizens of Marshfield are in great hands with the work that Steve does. I will tell you, it is not uncommon for myself and the council to get an email at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning, and you look at it like, who's doing this? It's Steve. Or 7 o'clock on a Sunday evening. And that's not what nobody has that expectation. But that's Steve's passion about his job and the love that he has for the city. And I will tell you that it goes all around. You see it with his staff. So we can't talk about the specifics of what we went over in closed session, but I can tell you the citizens are in great hands.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. I love being here. I've been here 8 years. I just enjoy Marshfield. We also have a great council and really good staff. And I would want the public to know that there's people, elected officials and appointed officials, who really put everything they have into trying to make this a better place. You might be a citizen saying, well, I don't agree with the temporary parking over by the 2nd Street Community Center, or I don't agree with how the Wenzel Family Plaza discussion unfolded a couple years ago. We didn't talk enough about parking, or whatever they think. But know that the people who are involved in the city, both on the elected and appointed side, are really dedicated, and they give it everything they've got. I mean, that meeting we had the other night lasted 3.5 hours. I mean, people could easily be home, putting their feet up on the coffee table, and yet they're grappling with these issues about how to get more economic development, how to deal with important contracts. And I think the community's in good hands. And that starts with the mayor and council and works its way down. The only thing go ahead.
Go ahead.
The
I
only
was just going to say, we could do virtual council meetings, I guess. That wouldn't be very fun.
It's kind of funny. We've had conversation before about, could a council member participate remotely? And it is possible to have someone Skyped in or whatever, but we've kind of teased about that. What if somebody was at a conference in a hotel room and they've got their feet up on and they're just kind of hanging out, eating and drinking, and that might not be the best Skype in the world. So we haven't done that so far, but it could happen someday. Electronically, it is allowed now under some scenarios that it didn't used to be. The only other thing I was going to say in relationship to what you said about closed session, I'm hopeful that in the next couple of months we'll be able to release something, especially where the mall is concerned. I get a lot of questions from people about the future of the Marshfield Mall. I think good things are happening, good discussions are happening. The city is trying to see to what degree it's reasonable for us to partner in trying to improve the mall. At this point, though, there's nothing specific I can let go. And after joking about the pot-bellied pig thing before we started, I'm just going to say real briefly, that what came out of it was good. Sometimes what comes out of concerns that the public raises is good, and they don't realize how good it is. It forced us to go back and say, well, you know what, this person can't have one because he lives here and he's less than 200 feet away from his neighbors. But while we're reading it, we're saying, this ordinance is old. It refers to a committee on health we don't have anymore, a building services supervisor making a recommendation, we don't even have that position anymore. And it seems to lump all farm animals together and not distinguish possible pets. Like a pot-bellied pig, is that really similar to a cow and a horse, or is it some other way we ought to classify it? And no decisions have been made yet on changes, but we're looking at an ordinance that's probably, I don't know how many years old it is, and saying, we need to update that. Do we still want to keep the same requirements we have now? Maybe yes, maybe no. But that person coming to the podium and giving his time that night and saying, I'd like to have a pot-bellied pig as a pet, is now starting a discussion about whether or not We want to allow what, where, when, and how that hasn't been had for a while. Thank that person for his input, and we want to see more of that.